right, we're going to go over defensive ratings and positional choices. The way we do it in general terms is pretty much like every draft league out there. So nothing, if you're in draft leagues, you're very familiar with what we're doing and sort of how we do it. If you haven't been in draft leagues often, it can be a bit daunting. So, it's good to go over this and get an idea of what you're facing and what you need to do to make the right choices. So, over here in auction worksheet, there is a little model, which I think is correct. But we're not gonna. And this model lets you punch in to sort of jump to the end. Lets you punch in your guys and figure out what your ratings would be in a 3-4 or a 4-3 scenario. Okay. But let's start with the charter. And in the charter, you will see, where are we here? Defense. Let's head it up, move it around. Okay. You can see in here how to calculate whether your cards for your defense will be good, average, poor, or very poor. If you haven't played in a draft league ever, it's important to know that those cards are different. So the defensive cards that you get like in a stock league, right? You don't use those in a draft league. They're special draft cards made for leagues that take in players and don't do stock. Take in unique players, unique teams, whether it's draft or auction. If you're making up your own roster, building a league, the Stratomatic community created these draft league defensive cards, and they run at very poor, average, good, and excellent. We don't use excellent. We only go up as high as good. Those cards are quite different. It's important, to try to get as good of a rating as you can. So if you have a 3-4 run defense that's very poor, this is what your card will look like. Okay. By the way, Ed has these cards in electronic form that you can see now before they're loaded in for your team right here at this website, somifa.com/somifa.html. Okay. And then you want to go into SOM draft defensive cards so you can look at them. But just to give you an idea, if you have a very poor 3-4 run defense on linebuck, no men, it's 13 yards. Okay. If it's good, it's just 6 yards. So your rating makes a pretty big difference. Okay. Pass is even more important, in my opinion, as I've said many times on broadcasts, primarily because we use individual fumbles. Okay. So these fumble ratings that you see here aren't going to matter for us because it's individual fumble, depends on the ball carrier's fumble rating. The defensive cards have no influence over that number. Okay. But the defensive cards do have an impact on interceptions. So here's a very poor pass card. Long pass, one man, interception split. You see here's 2-3. If your pass is good, that interception split is 2-6, 11, 12. So pretty big difference there. In addition to all the other things, the frequency of receiver ratings, receiver outcomes, the number of completions, etc., all get worse as you go. So it's what's called a double counting league. And the reason why it's called double counting is because those who have bad guys tend to have, low-rated defensive guys tend, of course, to have low-rated cards. So you get hit not only in the worst cards, but you also get hit because their ratings are going to be lower. And when you have a challenge like a Defender X, more likely than not, if you have a very poor defense, that you're going to lose that challenge, right? Or if you have a good defense, you're probably going to do better because you have 5s and 6s. So it's called double counting for that reason, and it makes this choice and the decisions around it very important. So let's go back to the charter. The way you determine whether you're good, average, poor, or very poor for run and for pass is to add up your guys a certain way by position. And if they reach, when they add them all up, if the value is over these thresholds, then that's the rating. So for example, and we'll go into detail here for run, if it's over better than 32, then 32 or better, then you have a good run defense. Okay, and so forth, right on down the line. How do you calculate that? Well, let's go back here. For 3-4 run defense, for example, it takes a percentage of each of the positions that matter. What positions matter for a 3-4 run defense? For your 3-4 run card, if you choose the 3-4, all these positions here that have a number in them matter. So it's only we're talking about the ones that don't matter. Cornerback 2, and your weakest run rating safety. Those won't be counted in. What does get counted in is everybody else, but they get counted in at different weights. Your linemen, for example, come in at full value. You see, this is the calculation column here. We're calculating right here. You see the sum is 31.8. Okay, you can see that right down here, sum 31.8. How do we get to that weird number? Well, the defensive linemen go at 100%. The outside linebackers go at 50%. The inside linebackers go at 75% of their rating. And the strong safety goes at 100%. When you add it all up, it's 31.8. We then chop off the decimal point, and you get it down to 31. And that's the number that matters. So if you have 31, go back to the charter. You're not going to be good because you didn't hit 32. You'll be average. For 4-3 run, linemen again go at 100% each. See that? This is the calculation column right here. You see it's the full value of the rating. The linebackers go in at 50%. And 100% of the strong safety. In this case, again, it's 31. Not always true. Typically won't be the same. It is in this case, though, and 31. So before, if those were your players, would yield you an average run D out of the 4-3. Pass defense for 3-4, taking 50% of the outside linebackers and 25% of the inside linebackers. 100% of the cornerbacks, 100% of the safeties pass rating. In this case, it leads to 25. Pass rating is not the same numbers. It's down here. Good is 27 or better. Average is 24 or better. So since truncated value is 25, that leads to an average 3-4 pass defense. 4-3 takes 50% of each of the linebackers, 100% of the defensive backs. If your guy's a 0, it counts as 3. It's not 0, it counts as 3. Remember that. And there you see the number. Adds up in this case to 26. So you're going to want to punch this in. You want to keep in mind one important rule too, that you can't start somebody on run and somebody else on your pass D. It's one starting 11. You have to live with those 11 guys. So I have Joey Bosa, for example, right? He's a 3-pass, 6-run. You might think, well, okay, well, I'm going to start Bosa on run and start somebody else in pass who doesn't have a 3 rating, but maybe a 4, 5, or 6 rating. No, can't do that. Bosa's starting or he's not. That's it. Okay. Make sure you keep in mind the penalties. If If you start your nose tackle in a 4-3, he's going to be -1. If you start your defensive tackle as a nose, he's going to be -1. Start somebody who's designated an SC at one of your boundary cornerback positions here, and they're going to be -2 from the rating. Okay. Again, pretty much universal across all draft leagues, these rules. SC is what we designate them in our league. So, for example, we'll see SCs here, right? Elijah Molden, I have him in Autumn Wind. Scott has him here in SFAL. Got a 4 SC. Well, if you start him, can't go below 3, but he would be a 3. -2 is 2, but lowest is 3, so he would be a 3. You don't actually get that full rating there because those SCs actually do take the penalty in the game. And if you played the game, put Elijah Molden in, you'd find out the Stratomatic is exactly what the game does. It takes him down. He would not be a 4 in a cornerback role in Stratomatic football. So, a couple of the things. You want to, when you're trading, when you're looking at who you want to trade for, you want to look for trade partners that kind of have some synergy with. In the next version of the roster file, we're going to put out, just put this together. I've been excelling a lot today. I haven't seen anybody do this before in a draft league. A snapshot of everybody's defensive ratings based on your rosters. This pulls it in directly from the rosters. Okay. And gives you an idea of what your rating is, but it's unofficial. Okay, these aren't perfect, but it gives you a good idea of where you are. Okay, so for example, I'll just take my team Atlanta in a 4-3 run defense. My defensive tackles are 5 and 4, right? Well, let's take a look at my defensive tackles. See here, it says 5 and 5. Well, picking up the Vita Vea as a nose tackle in a 4-3, it's penalizing him 1. Okay, because he would be rated only as a 4 in a 4-3 defense. And that's why you see this 4 here for Atlanta. Okay. My 2 defensive ends are 6 and 4. And then it's taking 5, 6, 5 linebackers, pulling the best ratings out of my roster. Let's take a look at this 6 right here at outside linebacker, the aforementioned Joey Bosa, right? It's finding that, it's saying, okay, well, that's our number 1 rating there. We're going to use that. But the program here is not going to be able to take him out of the pasty. It's just looking for the best. Okay, so this speaks directly to this first note here. This worksheet sources up to the highest and second highest values at each position, even if that results in the ratings being derived from more than 11 players. However, note that each franchise may only choose 11 players to qualify for the ratings. So for somebody like me, I need to be careful. Okay, don't believe everything you read. Maybe I don't want to start Bosa because he brings me that 3 in pass. So then that 6 really isn't a 6. Whoever I put in there instead, if his rating's a 5, that's what it would be. And you see it brings me down to average, okay, instead of good here at the rating level. So beware. But this is a good barometer, not only for your team, but when you're going back to when you're trading, you can see where your other guys at, what they might need. And the whole purpose of trading is not to rip the other guy off. That's not the idea. It should never be an idea. The idea should be to maximize mutual benefit. Look for opportunities where you find a trading partner where there's synergies, where it turns out your depth would give them an increase in rating, your depth would give them an increase in rating, and their depth would give you an increase in rating, okay, or get you on the road to it. That's really what you're looking for in a trading partner. So knowing what you're having, the empathy, first of all, right, to think about more than yourself, but then also it's a big advantage because you can tell your trading partner, hey, I got something that you need, you got something I need, let's make a swap, versus just looking at what you need, which is going to probably result in a lot of frustration for you if you're out there trading. And another note on trading, do this kind of homework beforehand if you can. Don't just sit back and say, "Hey, make me an offer," every 5 seconds. It's going to result probably in a frustrating trading period for you. Bring something to the table if you can. Do a little work beforehand. Say, "Hey, I see a potential fit here. Let's see if we can work something out." Most likely, you'll have a much more successful use of your time, and you'll end up with a better team. I don't think I've missed anything. I'm just going to take one more sort of look around here just to make sure. Where they do get truncated. So if it's 20.75, that's a 20. You take this off, the decimals. Let's just read these rules for the heck of it. The run and pass cards, again, must be based on the same group of 11 players. The combination of players to be used for qualification should be to obtain the highest defensive total, even though the players don't have to be starters in the game. So what does that mean? That's a good point. So the lineup that you produce to get your rating does not actually mean you have to start that guy in the position all season long. Once the game starts, you can put anybody anywhere, okay, that the rules allow. You're not signing up to play those players at that position forever in game. No one player may be used for two different positions. Okay, so players rated as a 4-6 defensive end and as a 4-4-6 outside linebacker cannot be used for both. Simultaneously calculating. For linebackers, the ratings for two different linebackers cannot be used for one position, i.e., for one inside linebacker, one cannot use the pass defense rating from one ILB and the run defense from another ILB. So you must have that singular starting 11. We talked about the penalties for defensive tackles and nose tackles. We talked about the SCs. Also applies to DBs. They also get the minus 2. And then I guess one last thing to cover is, what do you want to run? Do you want to run a 4-3 or a 3-4? You're going to find usually that most people want to run a 3-4. And they want to do that to help protect against flat passing. And they want to do that because you get the benefit of the two linebacker and zone column, which is pretty stout at any level. And it helps out at the goal line. Also helps that if you go to a 3-3-5 nickel, you're not getting penalized with your defensive tackle taking a -1. Okay, so keep that in mind. Oh shoot, there's another thing to talk about. Your defensive declaration that you make this week is, unlike a lot of leagues, it's not the last time you'll make that declaration. We have in-season trading. Make sure you read about in-season trading. The headline of it is you can only make one trade in-season trade a year, and it can't involve a running card or a passing card. Okay, it's not meant to remake your team. We don't want to all of a sudden end up with a super team. The auction is the primary place where you should be acquiring your talent, not remaking your team mid-season. But what in-season, as we talked about in a previous broadcast, what in-season trading does is it, at least if your team is not looking too good, again, there's no tanking in this league. There's no real benefit of tanking. Obviously, there's no draft picks at the end. But if your team isn't looking so good and you look like you're more of a seller than a buyer, you can go out and acquire probably going to be a good keeper for somebody who's really interested in competing and trade them a high dollar player that is unlikely a keeper. So it just allows just that little tweak, just one trade to do that. And if you do that, right, you might want to, as a result of that trade, you might want to switch your formations. Well, you have the opportunity to do it, even if whether it's because of a trade or whether just because you just don't like the way the defense is running. You can make before the end of each quarter, you can say, hey, next quarter, I'm going to switch it up. And we will switch it up. You can also do so before the start of the playoffs. All right, that's all I have on this. Hope it's helpful. Any questions, send them my way. Dennis and Michael are experts as well, of course. Others, Butch, experts at this sort of thing. So feel free to ping any of us, and we'd be happy to help. Thanks for watching.
You've been watching CBS Sports coverage of the National Football League.